Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colwood for YouTube. Back to finally cover Chapter 6 To Be Night and Beguile, written by John Philip Bencourt. Sorry for the long overdue delay, guys. It has just been a crazy week. Really crazy. Um, so here we go. The DÆNEANS of ENAKAYA. I probably butchered that. I apologize. On a late afternoon weekday, Terramore House was quiet and sedated. The family was out. Sebastian was off in his own world, keeping himself at locked thicket, safe from the disappointing eyes of his family. Nicholas Jordan was alone in a giant mansion, and he was on a mission. As his As the several meaty maids in their black uniform dresses with white aprons and matching white lace hats busily worked, Nick made his own way back to the offices where he and Evie had disguised the strangeness of the whole island. He had it in him that there were secrets to be uncovered, and he felt the nexus of all the shadows and darkness lied inside the papers, files, and books inside the late Albert Lord's office and library. He thought of Alice and their own conversation about the same topic. He was falling in love with her and thought if he found something that proved her right, perhaps he'd even get close to her. As Nick covertly skirted around the halls of the mansion, making his way to Albert's library, he couldn't help but wonder what what would he find? Secrets uncovered, lies revealed, hidden scandals broken wide open, and hopefully relief from the darkness that seemed to swallow up the whole island. The red carpets of the halls crimson like the lips of women in a painting in the house's main hall finally led Nick back to the office and library door. Its cool golden knob was decorated with a wreath of ivy and garland. He turned it and entered, allowing the smell of stale papers and old leather, just like all the libraries of this world smelled. Nick closed the door behind him and carefully walked around the various shelves of old books, stories centuries old. Some stood on their old oak shelves like tiny tombstones bound in leather. Shakespeare, Voltaire, Austen, Poe. As Nick slowly made his way through the several shelves of books on history and art and world events, he passed the painting that had the vanishing eyes. They remained still, no one was watching. Then he came to the desk, thick of oak and cherry wood. Carved in its sides were stories from the Bible, like Noah and the ark, Moses parting the Red Sea, Lazarus awaking from death. After looking over the unique carvings, Dick went behind the desk, allowing the sun from the windows behind him shine down a pattern over him. From behind, he opened the top drawer, empty. Top middle drawer, empty too. Everything seemed to have been removed, perhaps after Albert died. There was nothing to find, no secrets and scandals. There were no flies, no files. Frustrated, Nick thought that perhaps he was wrong, perhaps that he let Alice lead him into this fantastic world of suspicion and conspiracy, and none of it was real. Everything in the office was typical and normal of any office Nick had ever seen. Was Alice just as disturbed as Evie said she might be? Then it dawned on Nick. He had forgotten to look at the bottom drawers of Albert's old desk. He leaped over and pulled the first one open. Empty, then expecting to find the very last drawer as empty as all the rest, he opened it and found a small hand-sized globes on a gold stand mounted in a heavy golden vase. Standing in the otherwise empty final drawer, it was peculiar strange that it was just standing there on its own. Nick reached for globe, and when it lifted, the bottom panel of the drawer popped open, revealing a hidden compartment that the globe was holding down to conceal its existence. Nick reached into the secret compartment and removed a small journal, a book handwritten by Albert Lord himself. Nick stared at the journal with Albert's initials, personally carved into leather by Albert's own hand. The leather strap was tied tightly in a neat knot. He thought about removing the tie, but not for long. Nick unwrapped the journal and began to read it, every single sordid detail. In a surprising revelation, the pages of the journal had entries not just by one person, as Nick suspected, but several. They were written by Albert Lord, Albert's father, Johann, by Johann's father, Francis, by Francis' father, Calgary. The entries by each of the Lord men were confessions and receipts of lands taken by the five first families who settled on the island from England. Calgary Lord and his family came over from London in 1704, and with his alliance with Ciren and Lockwood planned to rule the island as their own. This alliance was in direct contrast with the alliance of the other Welsh families, the Churchills, Morgans, and Greylands, who settled on Welshport Island in October of that year. Lords, however, soon betrayed even the Lockwoods and overpowered the whole families by pushing them out over the years with shady business deals and schemes. The last remaining descendants of those families on Welshport was Rebecca, who was the great-great-granddaughter of Ciren Lockwood. The island was taken by these British and Welsh settlers that included the lords, and others were from the DÆNEIAN people, the tribe that first lived on the island of Welshport, or by the island's native name. The lord men wrote about their plots to take over the island from other families, detail after detail, but what was most disturbing to Nick were the details of the initial takeover of every patch of stolen land from the tribe, complete with the names of the people that were killed in order to take this island and inhabit it. Name after name, acre after tiny acre, death after death. The final entry was by Albert Lord himself. The last patch of land and lords had helped take over from the Dami people was complete in 1882. The last family of DÆNEIAN had been burned alive. Their home, as rustic as it was, has a view of the small island off the coast of our beautiful Welshport. Albert said in his final entry, Terramore House is almost done, and I'll be happy to see them gone. The five adults went quickly, but the small boy and even smaller girl somehow vanished in the smoke and ash as we burned it down. They may have perished. May the rest in whatever peace they find. Theirs is ours now. Nick could almost hear the screams of the native people coming from the past. He could almost feel the flames of the burning village, the heat on his face, the fire in his eyes, the powerful images in his mind of the terror of the indigenous people had suffered felt real to him, and as real through the various entries in the journal. He could smell the death of the tribes, and he felt a sadness inside of his heart for the loss of all they had, acre after acre, person after person, Tiny village after tiny village, the sick cruelty of Albert's words made Nick feel his stomach tighten with disgust. The other entries by Albert and the other men were not better. To think these men and the other first settlers had killed an entire people for this small island. Wait, Nick said, licking his fingers and going back to the Albert's last entry. The young boy and girl, last ones. He was putting two and two together. Matthew Winterbourne had told him of his family, that he and Alice were the last of their people, but Nick took that as a meaning they had no family, not in the literal sense that they were truly the last of their culture. Could could it be? And what did I leave off? Could it be? Could Matthew and Alice be these little children? Albert, though he killed when he burned, and the others burned down the home of the family. The idea was shocking, sickening, but it seemed plausible. There were parallels all through the book and the stories Matthew and Alice had told Nick. In belief moments of honesty on the siblings' part, Nick closed the journal, its pages slapped together like the locking of a pair of lying lips, and he sat there gobsmacked at its revelations. They're goddamn monsters, Nick said to himself, every last one of them, lying off of blood of other humans. As the truth of settlement of Welshport on the backs and murders of its natives sank in, it made Nick even more furious. He had to tell Matthew and Alice. He quickly replaced the globe in a drawer and made his way out of the library. The truth was in his hands and in the pages of evil journal kept by Albert Lorry, and his murderous ancestors was all too damning not to expose. The busy center of town became even more busy when the locals got a special visit from the lords, who were making their way through the shops in town, gathering items for Jacob's inevitable return to the mansion. New bedding for him, fresh towels, and even new drapes for his room. Rebecca, who was still very wary of her own son, was still the type of blue-blooded New Englander who knew the best and freshest of linens and clothing was always a helper in the healing of a sick person, at least in the mental capacity. While Rebecca, her personal maid, Georgina, and Evie shopped in town, Winterbourne siblings Matthew and Alice walked along the village sidewalks discussing her continued fears of what was to come. You have to try and suppress all these fears of yours, Matthew said in his dark suit as he walked with Alice's arm safely locked under his. It's the only way you'll ever find some kind of peace of mind, he added. How can I do that when I know what I know and what I've seen? What what I've seen. There is an imminent danger lurking in the shadows of this town, and if we don't rid Welshport of this evil, it will only fester and get worse. It's been a long time coming, and now the innocent people who live here have to be kept safe. They didn't ask to be born and raised here, and now they have to be kept safe, Alice warned. Matthew stopped there walking in the middle of the walkway in front of the linen store and turned to his sister so that they were now facing each other. What does that mean, long time coming? He asked, his face shadowed by the bowler hat on his head and covered in worry. Have you been planning something for a long time, Alice? This is a type of behavior that got you locked up in Wincliffe. This type of paranoia. I need you to stop. The people of Welshport are safe. Alice smiled politely and squeezed his hands. She could see that the way he he was only trying to protect her as any big brother would. But over the years he had let go of the past of their people. He had forgotten how much was taken from them by cruel means, by violence and by betrayal. He had forgotten They were the last of their kind, and they were the only two held the keys to the truth of how the island was inhabited, and how the spirits of their people haunted every corner of this wooded place. Those ghosts were real. They held in their the terror of death and sickness, were the source of a curse so powerful that it remained even now in them, in the people of Welshport, and in the lords and all their ancestors. I know you want to believe that, but you haven't seen and felt and experienced all that I have in my dreams and visions. You know, a long time ago, you used to be able to channel those experiences too. I wish you remembered more, she said to him. I remembered fine, and that was a lifetime ago, he argued back. If that were true, then you'd understand why I'm so persistent about writing the great wrong out people suffered centuries ago. It's the it's this original sin that has brought us to this point. That curse is now manifested in the form of a creature so vicious that it may eventually kill us all. And if we don't kill it first, Alice warned. You really believe that? Do you believe that Sebastian is this thing you saw that you keep seeing in visions? Matthew asked. I do. There is no doubt in my mind. If we want peace on this island, our people called home once more, he must be destroyed first, Alice replied darkly. First? Matthew asked, confused. But before Alice could explain further, Evie Jordan Lord exited the store Matthew and Alice were standing in front of as she, Rebecca, and Georgina were inside shopping. Alice, my goodness, how are you? I'm so happy to see you again after all these months, Evie said, glowing in happiness to see her old friend from Welshport, even though in the back of her mind she somewhat wanted to keep a distance from her. Evie, Alice said, reaching over to her and hugging her tightly. Their two dresses matching together in a contrast of Evie's plump colored and Alice's dark blue. This is my brother Matthew, Alice added. Matthew's eyes sparkled. He had not even seen Evie up close, only from afar, and not only for a long time. He was in passing that he had seen her a week before. As she and Nicholas had been in town together, she was a vision to him, almost glowing. Her eyes sparkled, and her smile was like a ray of sun beaming from the hot heavens. He suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. This beautiful woman that had been the source of so much struggle within this perimeter of his life had suddenly become real, touchable. Her voice entered his mind and stayed there like a song he loved playing over and over so perfectly. Afternoon, Matthew said, removing his tight tipping hat, and her almost shyly and somewhat smitten with just the first introduction. Evie smirked and curtsied in return. Equally as shy, she had not noticed how handsome Alice's brother was in their brief interaction either. Good to see you, Evie said to Matthew. How have things been, Alice, now that you've been home for a good long time? I hope you've finally gotten back into regular life, whatever that means, Evie giggled. Regular life, Alice smiled. I don't really know how exactly I would do that, knowing what I know. Knowing what you know, Evie repeated. Alice, Matthew began before his sister continued. I've been worried about you, Evie, ever since we both connected at Wincliffe. I've had such a deep concern for you and your return here to this island. I felt so strongly inside of me that you've been in terrible danger, but then again, I feel as if you know this too, Alice said to her old friend. Danger? Whatever do you mean? Amy asked, feeling a bit ambushed because she too knew what Alice was referring to. Though the glass of the window shop Through the glass of the window shop, Rebecca and Georgina watched the conversation, but stayed far away. I do not wish to say his name out loud on the street, but I think you know who and what I am talking about. He can't be trusted. He is no longer the man you believed him to be. The day you married, if you let me, I can help you rid your life of. Again, Alice was interrupted. Alice, you're speaking of my husband, the man who was taken from me the day we were married and has miraculously come back to me. We're trying to make things work under terrible, terrible circumstances and luck. I will hope you can respect that. I will not tolerate and talk of ridding myself of him. Evie replied, her tone now cold and angry. You should reconsider, Alice replied, now just as cold, to her friend. Alice, please don't get into this here, Matthew injected. Evie, I apologize, but my sister has these feelings sometimes and visions too. She's only trying to help. Evie turned to Matthew. His face was kind, his skin and tan and beautiful. She could see how deep his eyes were in their brown chestnut color, and he meant well, trying to keep the calm between her and Alice. But the truth was, Evie was in denial. She didn't want to hear any of it. She believed Sebastian was who she was meant to be with. Why else, Evie thought, would he have come back to her, even if it was the stranger creature that he was? The point Evie wanted to make to the Winterborns was to that he was back for her and only her. To Evie, Sebastian was a sort of dark angel. Perhaps you should tell your sister that I don't need help, Evie said to Matthew. Evie, Alice began before Evie interrupted her. Stop. Just stop. The heiress said, I came out here happy to see you both. My brother is so very smitten with you, Alice. I was excited for him to meet someone so interested in. Now I just have concerns about your relationship with him, Evie said to Alice's surprise. That has nothing to do with Nick, with my fondness of him, Alice said. Alice, please, Matthew interjected again, seeing Alice's anger returning. He's mentioned your concern to him, and I'm not so deluded by love that I don't see the things you see. But I know Sebastian, I know him with all my heart, and I know the dangers that lurk around the corner. And I've seen him up close and personal. The one we should be worried about is not Sebastian, but a man who is recuperating in the hospital from a gunshot wound. He's the true dark figure that we would all watch out for. And for now, it seems we're safe. He has no memory of his cruelty, for what that I am grateful. It's not Sebastian, do you understand me? It's not Sebastian. Matthew nodded his head, showing confirmation that Evie had made her case clear as a bell. He wanted no more talk about Evie's relationship or what Alice was seeing in her sleep, in her nightmares. In her vision, it was done. We completely understand, don't we, Alice? He said. Alice did not respond. She only stared at Evie with sadness. She was completely blinded by love and the shadow that was cast over the island all those centuries ago. But her people had covered her too. Alice, Evie was a lost cause. If anyone was going to help her, it would be Nick. He had yet to be tricked by the curse they all suffered from. Evie lifted a brow at Alice, who just stared at her intently. Well, it was nice seeing you, she said, clearly upset at Alice's entire conversation. Please, Evie, don't be angry with Alice. She really does care about you, Beth replied. Alice still remained silent. I did too, but I think those days are behind us. Take care, Alice, Evie, just before she stormed off and rejoined Rebecca and Georgina inside the shop. But in her mind, she knew deep down, she knew that Alice wasn't all wrong. Evie was educated, smart, very smart. She knew what the warning signs were. She saw them herself not long ago with the strange and violent outbursts of Sebastian. She knew his dark side very well, so well that she feared for her life at times, just as Alice suspected. But as smart as Evie was, she was equally as determined to prove them all wrong, to make Sebastian just as kind and loving as he once was before. She believed she could show him the way, and perhaps, by the amount of her love, she could save him. For her part, Alice saw that Evie, and for the matter, Matthew, would not help her. It was now incredibly clear to her that she would have to take matters into her own hands for the sake of all those who lived on the island. Back to the shop, Georgina and a shop girl carefully folded some of the new linens for Jacob's room into a large basket. The fresh scented sheets and towels could be smelled from the door. It calmed Evie just as she walked in from her very contingent arrangement outside. "And what was that all about?" Rebecca asked, not lifting her eyes from her task as the other two pairs of eyes looked at Eva with a sort of gossipy curiosity. "Nothing," Eva said, lying as he she helped fold. "My darling, we may have a wall and a window in between us, but body language through glass does not lie." "What did the Winterbournes have to say?" Rebecca asked again. "Alice and I know each other from Wincliffe. She was just asking about the family now that she's involved with my brother," Evie said, gazing over the truth. "Involved with?" Rebecca questioned. "They've gotten close." Rebecca finally lifted her eyes to stare into Evie's. The young heiress could see Rebecca's clear annoyance with Evie's brother already experiencing issues with some of the townies, not to mention a townie like Alice, fresh out of an insane asylum. "This is concerning. I don't like anyone attempt to know anyone around my family that gives off that kind of energy. I saw through those windows. In fact, I've made sure I've insinuated to anyone who has a negative energy like hers for years. It's toxic, Evangeline. It will creep up into your own soul and eat it alive. Ask any soothsayer, they'll tell you. Get rid of her," Rebecca said. "Get rid of her? Alice is not some sort of article of clothing I no longer have use for, Rebecca. She's someone I thought that was my friend, and now my brother seems to be fond of her. Besides, I don't just discard people like that," Evie said as she handed over the edge of the sheet she was helping Georgina fold. "Perhaps that is your issue, my dear. Sometimes cutting someone loose is not only the best thing for them, but you as well. It'll only get worse," Rebecca advised. "I think I can handle Alice Winterbourne," Evie replied. "Very well, handle her, but heed my words. Here and now, you've only just reinstated yourself at Terramore. All eyes are on you. I have enough to worry about when I think all of the condition Jacob will be in when he returns from the hospital, not to mention," Rebecca paused. "Not to mention what?" Evie asked. "Sebastian," Rebecca said as if a light bulb had lit above her head. "Was all that just now about Sebastian, Alice? Was she upset about Sebastian for some reason?" "Does she know about him?" Rebecca asked in a hushed voice, clarifying. Evie didn't know what to say, but she surely couldn't tell the truth, that Alice and Matthew did know the truth about Sebastian, and that they had some sort of dire warning out to Evie about how dangerous he was. Evie knew Rebecca wanted his return to continue to be played out as if he had never died, and that a strange secretive kidnapping and ransom had occurred, and that the pretend Sebastian was killed and the real one returned unharmed. The local media owned and operated by the Lord's Publishing Company, had already set that lie out all their papers. But Alice's bizarre outburst from out front that Rebecca only saw as a silent pantomime through glass made it seem that perhaps she knew more than she should, which was a problem. No, I assure you, Alice doesn't know a thing, Evie said, lying again. Georgina seemed to absorb the whole sordid argument like a sponge. Hoping no one would see through her own disguise, she continued to feel like she was on the edge of her seat or volcano. Rebecca lifted a brow but said nothing. Her light-colored eyes reflected the white of the now perfectly folded laundry they had just purchased for Jacob's return. She tilted her head and reached into her purse for the payment to the shop girl, who kept quiet the entire time while standing there, and other customers orbited around them. Evangeline, you're a lord now, Rebecca said. Make sure you remember that. Whatever happens, we always stick together, Rebecca warned, leaving Evie feeling as if she knew how now had made the right decision defending Sebastian to Alice, even though the tightening in her stomach was twisted into was telling her Alice was the one who was right about Sebastian. The light shines through 5 large windows built in a circle half in the room, Terramore House, that the family named the Yellow Room after the creamy yellow painted walls. The pattern of various squares from the window grill fell over the room like a giant thicket-toe table as Hampstead wheeled in the recuperating Jacob in the silver and gold wheelchair fresh out of the hospital. Where would you like to sit, sir? Hampstead asked Jacob, pointed to the windows. Hampstead situated Jacob and the rest of the family entered the room through a side entrance, ready to welcome him home, albeit reluctantly. Welcome back, Celeste, as he held Charlotte's hand, who repeated what her governess said. Jacob smiled at the lovely Celeste. You'll find that we have fresh linens and all the best comforts in your room. I hope that your recovery is speedy and easy, Rebecca said, as she sat on a sofa in front of her son. Thank you, Mother, Jacob replied. Ma'am, cook needs to go over the menu for tonight's dinner, Georgina said at the door as Rebecca excused herself, leaving Celeste and Charlotte alone with Jacob. I'm very happy to see you, Jacob said to Celeste. You've been good to Charlotte, and I don't think we could have asked for a better governess, he added. Well, she makes it easy. Such a good pupil. Celeste smiled at Charlotte. In her little minds, Charlotte and Sabrina went back and forth about Jacob's sudden change in demeanor. I don't trust him. His eyes are the same, cold, calculating, Sabrina's voice said an echo in Charlotte's mind. He's so happy, Charlotte's voice replied. Keep an eye on him. Do not let him out of your sight, Sabrina replied skeptically. Charlotte, go on and wash up for dinner, Celeste ordered. Celeste stood up, unsure what to do, as the tug-of-war of voices giving her orders conflicted. Sabrina wanted her to stay near her conniving father. Celeste wanted her to go to prepare their dinner. After a few seconds of strange stares, the young girl relented and listened to her earthly governess and rushed out of the room and down into the main hall of the mansion. She shook her head as if to shake off Sabrina from her mind. Stop, please stop. I wish for you to stop. She looked out of the side French doors that reflected her face, that suddenly changed to Sabrina. I need you to help me. Sabrina's ghost inside of Charlotte said through the reflection. I'm too tired, Aunt Sabrina. You're making me tired. Tonight, I quit you, Charlotte said out loud to the ghost reflection. of her dead aunt that dwelled in her mind. By quitting Sabrina, Charlotte was literally closing her connection to the spirit that she would now no longer have her voice in her mind. For now, Sabrina reached through the glass to grab onto Charlotte and hoped she wouldn't quit her voice, but it was too late. Charlotte squeezed her little eyes closed, and Sabrina's ghost went silent. Charlotte smiled happily with her own childlike thoughts and rushed up to the washroom to prepare for dinner for her family. Back in the other room, Celeste was making Jacob a drink, a dark brandy. "You're not having any?" he asked. "No," she replied quickly. "I could tell you now. I don't want to beat around the bush. I could tell," Jacob whispered. "I'm sorry, Miss Lord." "Tell what?" Celeste asked, figuring ignorance, but deep down she knew as she put her hands over her growing tummy. "You're with child, Celeste. It's a wonderful occasion. I'm thrilled," Jacob said, reaching for a drink being handed to him and grabbing hold of Celeste's hand. "Yes, Philippe and I are very happy," Celeste said, like, "Philippe? Oh, come now. We both know the truth. We both know when and where this child was conceived. You don't have to lie to me," Jacob, still squeezing her hand. "I don't know what you mean. Philippe and I are this child's very proud parents. I don't understand why you think otherwise," Celeste said, pulling her hand back. "Celeste, I have holes in my body and parts of my memory of the night that I was shot, but remember the night I made love to you. I remember how afraid you were and how I shamefully coerced, coerced you into doing my bed. I do feel horrible about that. I sincerely do," Jacob said, lying to her. He did not feel ashamed, but he needed to keep up the appearance. "Shame? You feel ashamed?" Celeste replied in disbelief. "Of course. I've had a very strange thing happen to me, my dear. As life as I know it has become just a moment in time where I finally realize I am not immortal and that all the things I wanted for myself are just, they are things. They are important, but this child is a fresh new start. I intend on making sure he or she is treated well. I promise you that," Jacob said, wheeling his silver and gold wheelchair over to her as she backed away. "You are not going to be part of this child's life, Jacob, and you and I both know that that is impossible," Celeste replied as she continued to step away from the man who, at one point, was steps away from opening up a world of scandal about her mother and his father's love child that would ruin their lives. "How can you say that?" Jacob said, pretending to be hurt by her words. "Because of my relationship with Philip. I love him. This child will be raised by at his, as his, not yours. No one can ever know that this baby is your child. No one," Celeste said, whispering, so no one could hear. "That disappoints me, but in a way I understand. It seems as though your attempt to protect your mother's secret has now created a new secret, hasn't it, Celeste? Now you have two secrets, and a strange twist they're parallel, aren't they?" "How very ironic," Jacob said, pointing out the mistakes her mother Christina had made with Albert Lord all those years ago was similar to hers with Jacob. "Are you promising me you won't say a word, just as your father said nothing about my brother, his son?" Celeste wondered. "I don't keep secrets, Celeste, but I also don't expose them. It wouldn't look good for me either if the mother of my child were to say I blackmailed her into my bed. For now the secret is safe, but I want to see the child whenever I want," Jacob ordered, showing his cruelty once more. Celeste paused and nodded her head in agreement. Then, feeling like she was locked in a hell she could not escape, rushing out the yellow room in tears, and ran into Evie, who was walking down the hall to Jacob. "Celeste, what is it? What is it?" Evie asked as Celeste pulled Evie out of the main hallway French doors and into two large terraces that faced a garden maze had yellowed in with the dawn of the autumn. Jacob, he remembers something about me, Celeste said through tears. What do you mean, something about you? Evie said, holding Celeste's trembling hands. Evie, I have to tell you something, but you must promise me you will never tell a single soul. This is the most important thing I will ever tell you, and I hate to put you in this position, but I need you to know the truth, Celeste said in a shaking voice to match her shaking body. Oh my God, Celeste, you're trembling. Here, take this, Evie said, removing her shawl and placing it over Celeste's shoulders. What is it? What did Jacob remember? A few months ago, he summoned me here to Terramore and showed me some papers that proved something about my mother that, if revealed, would not only tarnish her reputation, but also put my position here in this house and in this family in danger. I'd lose everything, and I can't afford it. He wanted something from me and for my silence, and I gave it to him, Celeste confessed. What did he ask for? Evie wondered. Me. He wanted me in his bed, and I agreed. And now I'm with his child, and he knows, Celeste said. Oh my. Evie, as she pulled Celeste in for a giant hug. The two friends knew the dangers of having something Jacob wanted. He wanted things from Evie, like the inheritance she was entitled to due to just being Sebastian's wife, and now Celeste was carrying his child, something so much more important than just money. The baby was Jacob's represented mortal child. His life would go through his children, and what that is what Jacob wanted more than anything else, power and everlasting life through the passing of his genes through children. Listen to me, Celeste. Listen to me, Evie said, lifting Celeste's face up to her chin, so that their eyes met. I will do anything in my power to protect you and this baby. He will not get his hands on this baby. I don't care how much he's supposed to change for good. I don't believe any of that, Evie said as Celeste smiled. You don't believe he's changed? Celeste wondered. He'll have to prove it to me, Evie said, affirming she wasn't buying this new and approved act of Jacob's. As the two hugged in solidarity, Evie suddenly felt ill. She began to sweat and sat down at a stone seat in the garden just off the terrace. How long have you been feeling like this? Celeste said, surprised that the illness came on too. Evie said quickly and out of nowhere. It happens off and on. And it started just yesterday morning, he replied. Evie. Sick in the morning, Celeste asked, suspicious of the family illness. Yes, and sometimes I get ill from just the smell of things, types of foods, even just getting dizzy for no reason, Evie said, sitting up, and again, after this quick wave of sickness seemed to suddenly pass, just as it mysteriously appeared. Well, 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 Celeste said, smiling, realizing what this mysterious illness was. What? What are you smiling? Evie said, dabbing the sweat off her temples with a pink handkerchief. These symptoms of yours are identical to what I felt when I realized I was having a baby. Evie, it looks like, but I could be wrong, that you too are going to be expecting something very soon, say 9 glorious months, Celeste said, grinning from ear to ear. The thought of Evie being pregnant was in a strange way the most terrible and beautiful news she ever received. She had always wanted to be a mother. She had always wanted to teach her child all she knew about the culture and art and music, all the things she loved. But then the sickness returned when she realized who the father was, Sebastian, her husband, the man who lived in the dark shadows of all the world. Evie turned and vomited over the stone banister into the bushes below as Celeste held her hair back. How could she bring a child into the world with a father like Sebastian? How could she keep this child safe? She truly was pregnant. And the creature that was Sebastian, she loved him. She truly did. But the love she had for the man she married was tainted by the creature he had become. She had never thought In her wildest dreams they would become parents under these circumstances. How would she raise this baby, knowing its father was a monster? How would she tell Sebastian? Now the two women, Celeste and Evie, stared in at each other, realizing they were in very delicate and dangerous positions. Life and death and every in between was in balance with the possibilities of the new children on the horizon. The moon was high in the newly night sky. Clouds floated over the westward woods of Terramore Forest like the small ships at sea below. The glow of the moon, Lockwood Thicket, small cottage where Sebastian Lord the vampire felt safe. Oh, this was his sanctuary, away from all the mansions and all in the village. In the distance of the forest, in the rustling leaves of the trees, a wolf bayed at the moon, its howl echoing through the forest and bouncing off the trees. Reaching cottage where Sebastian was buttoning up his thick coat and placing a top hat on his head, he was heading for Carrymore to see his family for dinner. As Sebastian stepped down the four front wooden steps of the cottage, he heard a strange rustling of leaves just behind a threshold of bushes. Beyond the front of the house, Sebastian turned to the sound, his eyes like burning through the darkness of the night, seeking the heart of the body. He could feel something there. It could sense its He could sense its pulse, the heart beating slowly and patiently as the creature in the shadowing was waiting for Sebastian to pounce first. Sebastian kept still and stared into the dark. He waited. He watched, his own heart beat even slower than the one he felt. Then the wolf howled again into the night at the moon, directing Sebastian, who turned towards where the wolf's howl was coming. It confused the vampire, who was expecting the wolf to jump out at him from the shadows, where he was sensing something watching him. And when Sebastian turned back towards the thumping heart, standing in front of him, now revealing themselves, was not a gray wolf ready to maul the vampire. It was Alice Winterbourne, dressed in a long black dress, with a real leather glove, with red leather gloves, and forced to take matters in her own hands about Sebastian, just as she promised herself, her hair flowing in the wind that came off the fresh ocean, which Sebastian said of her, "I have nothing of witchcraft in me, you demon. I am of earth and of the sky. I am of the sea, and of all places the sun touches, and where you can no longer touch. I'm here to rid the darkness and night of you. I'm here to save us all of your terror," Alice said, slowing closer and closer to the vampire Sebastian Lord. Sebastian smirked. He thought it was adorable this young woman, who believed herself to be something from another place, could take him on. He walked slowly towards Alice and removed his hat and tipped it to her. "Well, then, I guess we should have a meeting of the minds to discuss just for what we're about to do to me," Sebastian said, patronizing her. "I think you should be careful with your words, Simon. I have no patience for it," Alice answered. "I wish you all the happiness in the world," Alice Winterbourne. "And our short meetings in your dreams are particularly humorous for me. I have no fine entertainment where I can. So tell me, what is it that you want me to do?" Sebastian said, replacing his hat on his head. "You will die. I will see to it," Alice warned. "Will I? With garlic, a silver bullet, holy water, perhaps? Those are things of fantasies and stories, my dear, not reality. Your passion for my undoing seems as strong as my passion to survive. I think, all thanks to be close to my Evie. The one difference is," Sebastian began, now standing directly in front of Alice, "I am much stronger." Once the words left his lips, he attacked Alice, his mouth open, with his teeth bearing down on her. She screamed and fell backwards. Now, with his body on top of her, she slapped him across the face, but it was no use. He was too strong. He opened his mouth wider and wider, and it almost was as if his jaws were come had come unhinged. He went to her neck, so perfect in color, like a caramel candy, went down to bite. But then, like the magic she had inherited from her ancestors, the Damon people had summoned a cold gush of air with her hands, lifted Sebastian off of her, and suspending him in the air. Damon, she screamed at him from below. Sebastian only laughed at her with his teeth still pointed at her skin. He forced himself down back to the ground as a wolf once again howled in the dark of the night. It was howling for Sebastian of the coldness of the night that seemed to get colder and colder, almost like winter despite the autumn leaves not yet falling to the ground in full. Very impressive, Sebastian joked. Why do you hate me so? Why? What would I have ever do to you? We could be friends after all. You're in love with my brother, with the brother of the woman who I am in love with. Why? That's it, Sebastian said, his mind spinning in devilish whirl. We're family, Alice. We are family. Why would you want to hurt me? You are nothing of mine, nothing. Evie would do much better without you. You will only bring her pain and suffering and perhaps death. That is what I want to avoid. She deserves to be happy and not lost in the shadows you will provide for her. And how does young Nicholas feel? Sebastian said again, grinning his vampire smile. Do not speak of him, Alice warned, as she lifted her arm and extended all 5 fingers of her red gloved hand, toward back Sebastian where he stood. But it was no use. Sebastian wanted to end her life. He was done speaking to her. He lunged again and ripped at her dress, tearing its shoulders open. She slapped him again, and he bit her arm, cutting it open. He licked the blood from her wound, and she slapped his face once more, so hard it actually stunned this time. He only laughed at her fighting back. She was able to push him off in a scuffle, and she got from the ground. He put his feet on the back of her dress, locking her in place. The pressure of his foot on the dress made her trip and fall on her chest, her arm bleeding, the smell of the blood in his nose, on his lips, on his tongue, only made him want more of her. He jumped on her back and pulled her hair back off the neck and went to bite her. But then she shifted her hand and shut his eyes and screamed a sound so loud it woke up all the wolves in the forest and howled an incredible terror filled how that shook Welshport. An electric light blew spun out of her hands and around Sebastian's body, lifting back into the air. Then he was gone. She looked down at her dress now that she was alone, breathing hard, and saw that she was soaking wet with sea water. If she had been in the ocean herself, but she hadn't been. What she had done was transported Sebastian into the sea. He was now below the waves, drowning, pulling himself from the deep, deep blue ocean. It was so dark in the sea, all he saw was blackness, just like the bog in their nightmare, where Alice and Sebastian had fought before. The blackness was cutting off his air. He could not breathe. He could not move. He could only fight for his own life that was slowly fading, and then in the blackness a strange creature with glittering tail and sparkling green fins circled around him, around and around. A creature went watching him down, watching him gasp for air. He could not find air. Sebastian was going unconscious as he slowly drifted into the darkness of depth and sank deeper into the dark depths of the sea. He was placed, the creature, in the water with him, then came up to His face, it glistened in the sparkling fractures of moonlight from the surface. The greens of her scales sparkled like sequins. The gray of her eyes seemed to glow and pierce through the gloomy water. The creature was Alice in her creature form. She smiled at him sinisterly and kissed him on the lips, and then her voice, through a telepathic wave of power from her mind to his, said the final words he would hear just before swimming. He would hear just before her swimming off. You're dead, demon. You're dead. All right, guys, that is chapter 6. Sorry. I'll read chapter 7 tomorrow, so I can get caught up on my read alongs for Benight and Beguile. It's interesting that, again, because I haven't did the read along for chapter 7, so I'll do that tomorrow, but it's interesting. You have Nick, who has the secrets of the family in his hand. Alice is trying to take down Sebastian. Evie thinks the darkness is Jacob, and I can't say Evie's wrong either. Um, but keep in mind, there's other things going on too. I don't think we. Again, I'm going to give my opinion. I don't think we've heard the last of the former constable Christian Evans. I don't feel we've heard the last of him. Just sneaking suspicion. Something's. I won't say my spidey sense because I don't have it, but my reader sense is tingling. We'll see. All right, guys. You guys have a great day. Link will definitely be in the description box. This is really, really good. Can't wait to do chapter 7 tomorrow. See you guys later.